In 1953, a 27-year-old man had part of his brain surgically removed to cure his seizures. It worked. His seizures nearly stopped, but something else stopped too. From that day forward, for the rest of his life, he could never form a single new memory again. Every conversation, every meal, every person he met, gone within minutes. Forever stuck at age 27, waking up confused every single morning for the next 55 years. Scientists studied him more than almost any other patient in history. They knew him only by two letters, H.M., and what they learned from his broken brain rewrote everything we thought we knew about memory itself. His real name was Henry Molaison, though for decades, to protect his privacy, doctors only ever referred to him as H.M. As a child, Henry began having severe epileptic seizures, likely caused by a bicycle accident years earlier. By his 20s, the seizures had become unbearable, sometimes multiple times a day, severe enough to threaten his life and destroy any chance at a normal one. Medication wasn't working. Doctors had run out of standard options. In 1953, Henry and his family agreed to something experimental and drastic. A neurosurgeon named William Scoville proposed removing the parts of Henry's brain believed to be causing the seizures, structures on both sides deep inside the temporal lobes, including something called the hippocampus. At the time, almost nothing was known about what the hippocampus actually did. Scoville's approach was, by his own later admission, closer to an educated guess than an exact science. Henry consented. His seizures were destroying his life either way, and this offered a real chance to stop them. The surgery went ahead. Surgeons removed roughly 2 inches of tissue from both sides of Henry's brain. His seizures improved dramatically. For that specific goal, the surgery worked. But almost immediately, doctors and nurses noticed something deeply wrong. Henry could hold a conversation normally. He could speak clearly, recall his childhood, remember his own name and his family perfectly, but he could not remember anything that happened after the surgery for longer than about 20 to 30 seconds. A nurse could introduce herself, leave the room, and return 5 minutes later, and to Henry, they were meeting for the very first time. Every single time. He would read the same magazine repeatedly, genuinely surprised by the same articles over and over, with no memory of ever reading it before. His own reflection eventually became unfamiliar to him. As he aged, he would look in a mirror and be confused by the older face staring back, because in his own mind, he was still, permanently, 27 years old. Psychologist Brenda Milner began studying Henry just months after his surgery and continued working with him for decades. She quickly realized she was looking at something unprecedented, a living, real-time window into exactly what a part of the brain most people had never even heard of actually did. Each time Milner visited, she had to reintroduce herself. Each time, Henry greeted her as a stranger, politely, warmly, but with absolutely no recognition at all. For Henry, every single day for the next 55 years began exactly the same way. Waking up confused in an unfamiliar year, surrounded by people he'd never met, in a body that felt decades too old. Here's where Henry's case became one of the most important in the history of neuroscience. Milner discovered that Henry hadn't lost all forms of memory. He'd lost one very specific kind. In one experiment, she asked Henry to trace a star shape while watching his hand only through a mirror, a task that's genuinely difficult for anyone the first few tries. Each day, Henry insisted he'd never attempted this task before. He had no memory of the previous sessions at all, but his performance kept improving anyway. Day after day, his hand grew steadier, his tracing more accurate, even though his conscious mind had no memory of ever practicing. This was the breakthrough. It proved, for the first time with hard evidence, that memory wasn't one single system. There were actually at least 2 separate kinds. Declarative memory, the ability to consciously recall facts and events. That part of Henry's brain was gone. But procedural memory, the ability to learn physical skills through repetition, that part remained completely intact, even though Henry himself had no idea he possessed it. His body was learning things his mind could never consciously remember learning. This single discovery reshaped how scientists understood memory for the next 50 years, and it directly traces back to the hippocampus, the exact structure surgeons had removed from Henry's brain in 1953. Before Henry, doctors assumed memory was stored everywhere in the brain at once, diffusely, with no single critical location. Henry proved that theory wrong. One structure, on both sides of the brain, turned out to be essential for turning a moment into a lasting memory at all. For the rest of his life, Henry Molaison remained under close scientific study, one of the most examined brains in medical history, referenced in over 12,000 academic papers. He never once complained about his condition, And remarkably, despite forgetting every conversation within seconds, he remained consistently good-natured, polite, even quick with dry humor. Personality traits that apparently didn't require memory to persist. When asked how he felt about his life, in one of the few responses that stuck with researchers, Henry once said it was like waking from a dream, every single day, unable to know if what came before was real. Henry passed away in 2008 at 82 years old. Even then, his contribution to science wasn't finished. His brain was carefully preserved, sliced into over 2,400 thin sections, and digitally scanned in extraordinary detail, creating a resource researchers still study today. Everything modern neuroscience understands about how short-term memory becomes long-term memory, how the hippocampus works, and why certain forms of amnesia happen the way they do, traces back in some way to one man who never remembered any of it happening. Henry Molaison lived more than half a century unable to hold on to a single new memory. No new friends he could recall making. No memory of decades passing. Just an endless, repeating present, permanently anchored to a single afternoon in 1953. And yet, without ever knowing it, he handed neuroscience one of its greatest discoveries. Proof that memory isn't one simple thing, but several separate systems, quietly working together, mostly without our awareness. It's worth sitting with for a moment. Every memory you have, this video, this morning, the people you love, all of it depends entirely on a small structure most people never think about once in their entire lives. Henry lost his, and in losing it, he taught the rest of us exactly what it does.